Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We've gone live just for a special case. Just share the program or let someone that we're going live just to discuss a very specific matter. Yeah, just share. We'll be going live. We're discussing a very, very specific matter. We'll be doing this very regularly, I think, for the matters that have occurred. For example, the recent corruption scandal at the Anti-Corruption Commission and other institutions, and the depth of the corruption under President Hakainde Hichilema. Such matters requires that we put our thoughts together and gather the facts and discuss them in a manner that we'll be doing. Sometimes we'll even be taking phone calls. There are issues regarding the economy, there are issues regarding the state of our country, there are issues regarding issues of our debt, the load-shedding crisis that we have as a country. We'll be bringing them as special programs. Today we have a very, very specific matter. The 2022 country report on human rights practices in Zambia, as published by the United States government, State Department, did open a lead on human rights abuses in Zambia. The police, the Zambia Police, was cited as a significant contributor to human rights abuses in Zambia. Generally, the report stated, this is published on the US website, you can go for it and check it, that there have been significant human rights abuses in Zambia. And these included credible, verified reports of, number one, unlawful or arbitrary killings, number two, including extrajudicial killings, three, torture and cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment by government, harsh and life-threatening prison conditions, or our conditions in prison are terrible, extremely terrible. No human being should be subjected to the kind of conditions we have in our prison. Serious restrictions on freedom of expression and media, including violence and threats of violence against journalists, political leadership, the censorship or enforcement or threat or to enforce criminal libel laws to limit freedom of expression, and substantial interference with the rights of freedom of assembly, of association, and then serious government corruption. This is not discussing the past. This is discussing the presidency of President Hakainde Hichilema. So today we picked up a story of abductions and the case of human rights in Zambia. And just spare some moment, this is a matter we'll be speaking to. Recently, Zambia's top cop, Mr. Mubita Nawa, was on his hopeful way to head the International Criminal Police Organization, Interpol, as its next Secretary General, when ugly reports emerged in international press about his clearly unprofessional conduct while serving in the Zambia Police as Deputy Police Commissioner. Interpol is the world's largest international police organization dealing with over 196 member states' issues of police cooperation and crime control. A father and son, Vinod and Uddit Saddu, wrote a scathing letter to international media through their London lawyers, Leverett's group, to Interpol especially, stating that they had strong grounds to believe that Mr. Nawa played a pivotal role in a conspiracy that led to their unlawful kidnapping, detention, assault, extortion in September 2022. When I came across this letter and when I came across this report in the Guardian Weekly, I first of all exercised restraint because the candidate, Mubita Nawa, is a Zambian. And remember, loyalty to country first before we go into partisan politics or sectional interest or parochial interest. And I exercised a lot of restraint, but I also used the time to investigate this particular matter because here is a family of father and son alleging that they were unlawfully kidnapped or abducted, that they were detained illegally, that they were assaulted, and they were subjected to extortion. Now, these are very, very serious allegations. The Zambia Police, through its spokesperson, issued a statement at the time and denied that the matter that the father and son, Vinod and Uddit Saddu, were talking about were not credible and that there was no merit in their allegations and that the illegal detentions of the Saddus didn't take place. The police stated that the allegations were therefore baseless and untrue. Now, for me, those are things that interest me. Here are the very, very strong allegations of abduction. Here are the very strong allegations of kidnapping, of extortion by police officers and others. And here is the Zambia Police, as usual, rubbishing the claims. So I said, what is the truth? The last few weeks I've embarked on some form of research just to establish the truth, and the truth is here. I stumbled upon court documents filed in the Lusaka High Court, not in London, not in India, in Zambia. And I'm going to indulge you in the witness statement from the father, Mr. Vinod Saddu, who filed this document. He has filed the document through his lawyers, Meza Sangwa and Associates. His father, the father and son, all deposited sworn affidavits and signed into court. The case matter is 2023/HP/2001. And they've sued the police officers, Malambo, Bernard Piri, Mwamba, and a private citizen who purported to be a policeman called Rashid Mnali. They've also sued Muila Chintu. And, of course, when you sue the police, the Zambia Police, you have to sue the Attorney General, who are the legal counsel for government, its departments, and its agencies. Mr. Vinod Saddu states that he's managing director of Sun Pharmaceuticals Limited, and he resides at plot number 10968, Lunsemfa Road, Kalundu, and that he therefore then detailed his abduction, illegal detention, and extortion that happened to him. He says on 18th September 2022, he and his son arrived. His son is called Uddit Saddu. They arrived at Kenneth Kaunda International Airport in Lusaka. 10 days later, on 29th September 2022, the Director of Immigration called the Saddu's liaison officer, a Mr. Chifunda, asking them to inform Uddit, the son, to come and collect their immigration papers. He has narrated extensively that when they arrived at the airport, the son said he needed to update the document, and one of the immigration officers said, give me all your documents, all your company details and everything else, and I will ensure that we'll update your records. They are Indian, based in Zambia. They've been here since 1977. So, but they are Indians residing in Zambia. So on 29 September, when they were called, that the immigration department were ready for them, and they called a Mr. Chifunda. They rushed there. It was around 10 hours. And they arrived at Kent Buildings on Haile Selassie Road and were ushered in room 2012. They remember the room number. And they were met by an immigration officer who they had met at the airport, a Mr. Namangolwa, who they had met earlier at Kenneth Kaunda International Airport 10 days earlier on 18 September 2022. But surprisingly, a few minutes later, a group of 6 armed men wearing pistols invaded the room, and without introducing themselves and without showing any identity documents, led the Saddus downstairs and bundled them in the waiting van with one vehicle they remember was bearing number plate AID 1234. The Saddus tried to understand who these men were, what they were. They demanded for IDs, for introduction, but there was none. The men were uncompromising. And the Saddus, father and son, were put in one vehicle with a man in the forefront, in the front, called Rashid Munali. Munali was identified later as a member of the UPND, but he personates as a police officer, or is involved, is embedded in police activities, but is not known or registered as a police officer or as a reserve. Chifunda, remember their contact person in Zambia who handled these matters, is a Mr. Chifunda, was put in another vehicle where officers Mwila Chintu, Bernard Piri, a police officer identified that was from Sesheke Police, brought in Lusaka specifically for what appeared to be this assignment. And there were other individuals. The Saddus vehicle, which they had come with, remained behind. They were driven away with blazing sirens at high speed, and they remember that the officers were employing evasive maneuvers, and the convoy drove on the opposite of Addis Ababa dual carriageway. They remembered Addis Ababa Road. They later learned that the vehicles were being driven by a driver from State House. And one of them who was driving them identified himself as Mr. Levi Ngoma's driver. Mr. Levi Ngoma, as you know, is special assistant to President Hakainde Hichilema, in charge of politics. So the driver who was driving them was Mr. Levi Ngoma's driver. These are sworn documents in courts, as I've cited above. And they were saying, they continued, Mr. Vinod continued to state in his sworn affidavit that these men, who were now literally their captors, tried to confuse them to where they were going, because they were going round circles. It was in Kalundu that they landed at the house that looked like a private lodge, and opposite it was a newly constructed duplex. Now, when they retraced their steps later, they identified the house as house number 391, Lufubu Road, Kalundu, Lusaka. And he says he remembers this as this property was near a house where former President Dr. Kenneth Kaunda once lived when he left office. You remember that when Dr. Kaunda, I think in 1997, 1998, there was a coup d'etat and Dr. Kaunda was locked up in Mukobeko, but later released to a private house. There's that house in Kalundu. You remember Dr. Kaunda was renting it, and for that period it was gazetted as a temporary prison. When Dr. Kaunda was detained at his own house, it was gazetted as a prison. So Mr. Saddu has been here since 1977. He knows those circumstances. So he says when they arrived at the premises, they were photographed, and all items such as company documents, white books, passports, banking papers, and statements of accounts from Sun Pharmaceuticals Limited. And there was a letter of interest that was written on 27 September 2022 from the Ministry of Justice. All these were confiscated. They had gone with these documents to immigration department. Because remember, when you are getting your work permit or your resident permit, you have to show proof of your company or residence or employers, banking details, all these that are required. So these documents were with them, and they realized that maybe Mr. Namangolwa had alerted the police or had alerted these men to coordinate with them because they came with all these documents. The three, Mr. Chifunda, Mr. Vinod, and Mr. Uddit, were separated and locked up separately in the rooms. He remembers that Mr. Rashid Munali, Malambo, and Mwila Chintu interrogated him. And these now, he began to understand what it was all about. Mr. Rashid Munali, Malambo, and Mwila Chintu wanted to find out who the directors of Sun Pharmaceuticals Limited were. Who are the owners of this company? Who are the signatory to the banking details? And what was the relationship between the previous owner? He was also asked about his contributions to political parties. He said he didn't contribute to any, and the only political leader that he knew, he says, was Mr. Mazoka, who he has known since 1979. The captors said, tell us about the Kalenga family, because we understand that they own this pharmaceutical company. So he explained that, yes, he knew Honorable John Kalenga, and that he bought the company from him in the 70s. And he says later in the years, there was a contest from the family, the Kalenga family, and that this matter went to the High Court, to the Supreme Court, and to the Court of Appeal, High Court, Court of Appeal, and Supreme Court. And in his mind, it was settled because the ownership and the dispute was settled by the courts of law, and it went up to the Supreme Court. His son also has sworn his own affidavit, but the facts are similar, so I'll not repeat them because remember they were together. Then as they were being interviewed, this was from 10 hours, it went now, this is past lunch hour. So during the interviews, commotion emerged because they discovered that Mr. Chifunda, the Zambian, had sent an SOS message to someone that they've identified in their documents as William Banda. I don't know which William Banda this one is. And that Mr. Chifunda relayed the fears that they've been abducted by unknown persons. They have not been taken to a police station. They are at a private house, and he sent the location. And he said these men were purporting to be police officers, but have been kept at a place that looks like a lodge in Kalundu, and he sent a location. When they established that Chifunda had sent this SOS message, the police officers were, the so-called police officers at the time, were very, very annoyed. And the driver to Levin Goma produced a gun. This is in the sworn affidavit, and I'll publish it. He says the driver to Mr. Levin Goma produced a gun and threatened to kill Chifunda for hiding a phone and for sending a message to what he termed were outsiders. And the driver to Levin Goma has been cited. And this is what he said, he has been quoted. I can shoot you for what you have done. In the flying squad, we kill people for merely being in the wrong company. Of anyone we are targeting, how dare you hide this phone from us? This caused immediate chaos, especially for the three now. They were bundled together. And before long, they were put in a vehicle and they were rushed to Charleston Police Station. First they drove, he says, they drove to Kent Building back. This is around 15 hours. Picked the Saddu's vehicle and then drove to what they later identified as Charleston Police Station. They were ushered in the CIO's office. They now tried, when they were at the police station, they tried to reach out to their lawyers. They've identified their lawyers as Eric Slwamba and George Kunda and company. So they tried to reach the lawyers, but there was no avail. At Charleston Police, when they were brought in Charleston Police, they found 2 new people who they later identified as related to the Kalengas. And this is now where there's an interrogation about, again, it's repeated on the issues of Sun pharmaceutical companies, and the charge of extortion arises from here. Because now the police were telling them, they brought some form of agreement and they were saying, if you sign this agreement, we'll let you go. But the Saddus refused to sign. They said, until our lawyers are here, we don't know what we are signing. It was some form of, I think there's some money that is due to them, and they wanted, I think, company details signed over to whoever was representing the Kalengas. So they said it was only later, after 19 hours, that Mrs. Irene Kunda, remember the former vice president, the former second lady, she's a practicing lawyer, and she runs George Kunda and company, finally found the Saddus around 19 hours. But she was denied access to them. She tried, and Vinod, the father here, has high blood pressure, and he wanted his medications. And he couldn't be given access to the medications. In fact, the police decided to have them locked up. And Chifunda later told them that when they were being locked up, the captain in the police cells, if you've been to a police station and you've been locked up, there's usually what they call a captain, someone who's been probably older there or has fought his way to be the boss. They were told by one of the police officers that sort out these Indians. It's in the sworn affidavit. So Chifunda, who's Zambian, who understands both languages, Bemba and Nyanja, he had this issue and instruction to the captain, but he quickly went in, and when they were locked up, they negotiated. Guys, don't harm anyone, we'll see what we can do for you. They were detained. I'll not go very further about those particular details. You can look up in the sworn affidavit. The horror of their 24-hour detention was only over the following day. Now, I bothered to read these particular details to the last, although I've just summarized, because when we say the police are abducting people, when we say they are torturing people, when we say they are beating people, that we are being subjected to inhuman treatment, when we say the US report of 2022 has catalogued the misconduct of the police officers, when we say we've been abused, it's difficult for people to think that this is true. They'll think we are merely politicking. So when I found a case of innocent people, a matter that has torpedoed, I can dare say, Mubita Nawa's ascendance to be Secretary General of Interpol, he would have been a good ambassador for our country. But because of the behavior of the police in Zambia, and in this case, I jumped on this case of where Mr. Mubita Nawa has been named, that he also came on the Kalengas. He introduced himself, that was head of CID, and in the documents, he also approached the vineyard and he appeared to be in charge and to be understanding the matter. He has been named in this case. So it's not that it's far-fetched or that the sins of Zambia Police are being used against him. So the horror ended. The details will give you available. I've done a write-up which you can go to and read. But the reason I brought this case is that the case of the Saddus is not different from the case of Shabi Chilekwa. You remember Shabi Chilekwa, the barber to former President Edgar Lungu. You remember his lawyers stated that he was detained and he was tortured and that he wasn't detained in a police station. You remember that the lawyers stated that Shabi Chilekwa was detained at a house in Kalundu. Now we have the address, and we have other collaborators to this house that has been used as a torture chamber and an illegal detention center by the Zambia Police. We now have its address. We have our other confirmations. When Shabi Chilekwa, maybe because they were alleging a murder accused, maybe the details got lost when he said, I'm tortured, when he said, I've been detained and beaten at a police station in Kalundu. But here now we have, not a police station, a private home in Kalundu. We have its address, we have the road number, and we have confirmation by others. The aide-de-camp to President Edgar Lungu, he was Deputy Police Commissioner at the time, Sanga Chanda, also stated that he was detained and interrogated at a private facility in Kalundu. We can collaborate. It's the same place where they're not taking people to police stations. Others that have suffered inhuman, degrading, or torture, in this case, I'll just cite a few ones. Economic and Equity Party President, Chilufya Tayali. He stated, I think he narrated, you followed this, he had break-in by people that he suspected who had unique type of arms. He was taken and beaten, and he cited one of the police officers from service headquarters who beat him and slapped him and beat him, and they threw him in Chilanga. Remember the case of Patriots for Economic and Progressive Party leader, Sean Tembo, when the police went to his house and he was demanding that they wait for a lawyer. They broke into his house and he was beaten on the way to the police. He was brutally beaten. And he says he was literally abducted because he was waiting for a police to come, and the police, for a lawyer to come, and they couldn't even allow him to get a lawyer. The recent case of Special Assistant to the President, Chris Zumanzimba, who was Special Assistant to President Lungu for politics, his co-accused swore documents in the courts of law, in the Lusaka High Court, when they were asking for bail. Marlon Zimba, Port Fagwai, and Given Piri, they testified that they were brutally beaten and they were tortured. They even named the police officers that were involved in this torture and beating, and that they were kept away from family and lawyers for extended period. They saw the affidavits. You can look up the case number HBBA-16-2023. It reveals the sordid details. Lastly, you are aware about my case and my own experience. I was beaten and brutally handled and literally abducted. It was around lunch hour, and I was just going home, but I decided to pass through a car wash. I had no idea I was being trailed. And you think that the public place is your safest place, but that's where I was attacked by three vehicles, and there were about 12 people I saw who brutally captured me. And despite my open protestation, demand to speak to lawyers and my family, and despite members of the public being present, I was literally like abducted. If anyone was seeing from afar, you wouldn't think that this is a case of the police doing their job or apprehending someone. I was taken. I couldn't see both my family and my lawyers until the following day. I was taken to Zambia Police, and they ensured that members of my lawyers or supporters or colleagues, for example, in the Patriotic Front, didn't know where I was. It was the most traumatizing period for me, because I didn't know if anyone knew where I was, and in the manner I was handled. I was in pain, my neck was paining, I'd lost my tooth. Later I saw the bruises that some of you have seen the picture. The painful part was the following day. As soon as I saw my lawyer, I was told that I was being charged. I said, charged with what? That you assaulted the police officer. That really, You know, they beat you, they brutally beat you, they send you and they keep you away for 24 hours. Then they come and allege that you've assaulted a police officer. So the matter is in court. I can't go in details. But I had submitted a complaint to Woodlands Police Station, showing them my medical records, showing them my tooth that was removed, and I named the officers that brutally attacked me. That case has never been processed by Woodlands Police Station. I took my complaint to the Police and Public Complaints Commission. That matter has never been. The Human Rights Commission claimed that I took a copy to them. I subsequently took original copies. They've never attended to this matter. Today's discussion was over the matter of police and police abuse of human rights. There are many cases around this area, but because it's attracting attention, it's been documented in the U.S. Department's international report. You can find it on the website at U.S. State Department. And the recent Human Rights Watch report that was extensively discussing the shrinking democratic practices. But because they're human rights, they also attend to issues of human rights. And the police, again, took special attention. We will pick another subject another day. Today, we're discussing this matter that literally torpedoed the election of Mubita Nawa, who belonged to the Zambia Police, as Secretary General of Interpol. And the two members of this family, Vinod and Uddit, who complained to Interpol, who released the court documents that have been filed in the Lusaka High Court, and they released it to international media. And this went to, I think, affect the election of Mubita Nawa. But at the core of it should be the reform of the police, should be the reform, the removal of officers that are abusing that uniform. The police is a noble institution. It's there to protect us, not to torture or beat us. It's there to attend to crime and lock away criminals. It's not there to have the picture that the Zambia Police is having. Until we have another topic, I'm contending that we should discuss the corruption issues at the SEC and state department, state chambers, where there's this huge acts of corruption. We might have that matter maybe tomorrow. So until next time, God bless you, God bless our country, and shalom, shalom.